Hello, and welcome to the Inside ODOT podcast. My name is Liz McIntyre from ODOT's Delivery and Operations Division, and I'll be your host for today's episode. In this episode, we'll hear from Amanda Pietz as she introduces the new State of the System dashboard. Next, Sarah Kelber will share how ODOT uses education and awareness to put the brakes on human trafficking. And for our third and final segment, Crabb interviewed Ken Oke and Kylla Lanier to learn more about human trafficking. Welcome, and let's get started. Last September, Amanda Pietz, ODOT's Policy, Data, and Analysis Division Administrator, hosted a webinar previewing our new State of the System dashboard. In this webinar, Amanda shares how the dashboard helps Oregonians by providing transparency to the public surrounding our work.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. I wanted to share with you a website that will share information on the state of the transportation system. There used to be a report that was created years ago. It was called the State of the System, and it had information on how many roads do we have, how many bridges, statistics, highlighted some key and important work that we were moving towards, and say access management or other areas. That report kind of went away after time, and this is in a way a reprisal of that, where we're really talking about the performance of the transportation system. But it's different. It's on a website format, it's interactive, and it's really designed to be a dashboard to share information on what ODOT is, what we're doing well, maybe where we have areas for improvement, and really trying to focus on the experience that the general public has with us so that we're transparent. And that transparency is extremely important as we go into the legislative session and we look to seek additional funding for transportation. There needs to be transparency and clarity into the organization and the types of services we provide and how well we do that. And it's just a way for us inside the agency to make sure that we're using information to make informed decisions and to drive towards key outcomes. And so what you'll see as part of this site is we've identified a number of outcome areas that Oregonians care about. And really some of the work that we're doing within that are some of the areas of concern to really kind of daylight that. So it's really around transparency as a tool internally to track things. The purpose of sharing this today is we wanted you to be aware of what it is, have a chance to tour through that. We're recording this, so welcome to send this to others later that missed this webinar. We anticipate there'll be questions or comments coming in through the agency. As those come in, you're welcome to direct those to myself, Jacob Easter, or Kayla Hootsmans, and that you've had a chance to see this. So kind of in the no surprises vein, we wanted to share this tool that we've been working on over the last several months.
January is Human Trafficking Prevention Month. In this segment, Sarah Kelber from ODOT Communications shares how ODOT's Commerce and Compliance Division works with our partners to raise awareness and provide training resources to increase community safety.
The Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance's Human Trafficking Awareness Initiative takes place January 13th through 17th. During that week, our colleagues in the Commerce and Compliance Division, including trained motor carrier enforcement officers and safety inspectors, work with law enforcement partners to hand out materials to truck drivers and motor carriers at weigh stations statewide. The initiative is part of January's Human Trafficking Prevention Month, an annual campaign ODOT proudly supports. Every year, more than 27 million people fall victim to human trafficking worldwide. According to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, 132 cases involving 248 victims were identified here in Oregon in 2023. To combat these statistics, we partner with the Department of Homeland Security, Oregon Trucking Association, TAT, formerly Truckers Against Trafficking, the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance, and law enforcement to raise awareness about human trafficking and share resources to educate and work towards stopping this dreadful crime. TAT provides informational wallet cards, posters, and window decals in English and Spanish to hand out to drivers. Bowman Trucking volunteers as a motor carrier to display a large banner at Umatilla Port of Entry that's visible to 2 nearby highways. We share information on trip check, variable message signs around the state, radio spots, billboard ads, and social media posts throughout the month. We have even lit up the Woodburn Bridge in shades of blue to shine a light on human trafficking. Another of ODOT's key roles in combating human trafficking is to observe and report suspected trafficking to the appropriate authorities. CCD inspectors and enforcement officers receive annual training specific to the trucking and busing industry from TAT on how to recognize signs of human trafficking. 5 years ago, Director Strickler joined hundreds of transportation industry leaders in signing the Transportation Leaders Against Human Trafficking Pledge to collaborate to end human trafficking by raising public awareness, sharing data, and educating employees to recognize the signs. He did so with the understanding that the more we know about how to spot human trafficking, the more our industry can work together to bring it down. Since then, our organization has taken great strides to educate our staff and partners about the problem. Everyone has the potential to discover a human trafficking situation. Victims are often hidden right in front of us, at construction sites, restaurants, elder care centers, nail salons, agricultural fields, hotels, and more. Traffickers' use of coercion, such as threats of deportation and harm to the victim or their family members, is so powerful that even if you reach out to victims, they may be too fearful to accept your help. Non-citizen victims of human trafficking may not have immigration status in the United States and may be afraid to work with law enforcement. Traffickers often use a victim's lack of immigration status to exploit and control them. In addition, language and cultural barriers may make it difficult for victims to seek help. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services helps protect victims of human trafficking and other crimes by providing immigration relief to eligible victims. This provides a path for victims to stabilize their status in the United States and build a sense of safety and security. Eligibility for immigration relief generally requires the victim to cooperate with law enforcement in the detection, investigation, or prosecution of human trafficking, which increases community safety as a whole. If you suspect human trafficking, do not confront a suspected trafficker or alert a victim to any suspicions. If it's an emergency, call 911 or the National Human Trafficking Hotline at 1-888-373-7888. The hotline operates 24 hours a day. You may also text HELP or INFO to the number 233-733. Let's work together to put the brakes on human trafficking.
ODOT Public Information Officer Crabb interviewed Ken Oke, ODOT's Commerce and Compliance Division, Safety and Compliance Coordinator, and Kylla Lanier, TAT's Deputy Director and Senior Director of External Affairs, about human trafficking, signs to look for, and what to do if you suspect someone is being trafficked.
Happy New Year and welcome to the Inside ODOT podcast. I'm Crabb, a Public Information Officer with ODOT and your host for this segment. January is Human Trafficking Prevention Month, an annual nationwide campaign that ODOT proudly supports. Every year, more than 27 million people fall victim to human trafficking worldwide. According to the National Human Trafficking Hotline, 132 cases involving 248 victims were identified here in Oregon in 2023. I'm joined today by two very special guests who are dedicated to raising awareness about human trafficking. Ken Oke is the Safety and Compliance Coordinator for ODOT's Commerce and Compliance Division, where he assists in the coordination of Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration grant activities and human trafficking outreach and prevention efforts. Ken has worked with ODOT CCD for more than 20 years in various roles, and his work has allowed him to build partnerships with the transportation industry, law enforcement, and other government agencies. Welcome, Ken.
Thank you. Welcome.
We're also joined this morning by Kylla Lanier, Deputy Director and Senior Director of External Affairs for TAT. TAT is a nonprofit organization that stands committed to educate, equip, empower, and mobilize members of key industries and agencies to combat human trafficking. Kylla is responsible for TAT's global expansion and implementation of TAT's programming and legislation in all 50 states. She's been involved in the fight against human trafficking since 2007. Kylla, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
So I want to start with a basic question. What exactly is human trafficking?
Yes, so human trafficking is the exploitation of human beings through force, fraud, or coercion, either for the purposes of the commercial sex industry, and that would play out like in street-based prostitution, in massage parlors that have those sexual acts at the end. It can also be in the legal commercial sex industry with strip clubs and pornography. We have a lot of trafficking survivors that speak about how their traffickers exploited them there. And then we also have it in forced labor. It happens in agriculture and construction, but it also happens on cruise lines and fisheries, in nail salons where people go and get their manis and pedis done. You see it in restaurants and domestic labor. Just about any industry has it. And again, through force, fraud, and coercion, people are being compelled to participate either in commercial sex or in a labor situation where a third party is making that profit. And that is your trafficker.
So that's interesting because I'm in Northeast Portland, and a lot of times I will see prostitutes on the street that are definitely under 18, and you just automatically know that. But I never thought to consider that the people doing a pedicure or a manicure might also be trafficked. So that's really interesting. What are some warning signs that someone could be a victim? Like, what would I know to look for?
Well, I think what you just mentioned, if there is a minor being sold for commercial sex, it does not matter if you can see the trafficker or not. They can tell you that they're choosing to do it or whatever. They automatically are seen as a trafficking victim. There's no such thing as a child prostitute. This is a victim of human trafficking, and whether somebody's purchasing commercial sex for them, they're committing a felony of human trafficking by purchasing a minor. Maybe there are signs of physical abuse. That's part of that force. So if they've got bruising, cuts, burnings, things of that on their bodies, maybe that they are looking down a lot, they seem scared, somebody else is talking for them, somebody else is controlling them. Depending on the industry or where they're at, it might be really long hours. So maybe that hotel that you're checking into, the person that's checking you in at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, they're also the person checking you out at 10 a.m. the next day. They just don't seem to catch a break. They're just kept in bad living conditions. There could be really extraordinary amounts of security and cameras and bars on windows on businesses that just seem inappropriate or out of place. The warning signs change depending on what industry you're in, like what you're looking at. It's going to adapt.
Okay. So if I'm in that situation and I suspect that someone is being trafficked, what's the best approach for me to report it? I wouldn't think I'd want to talk to them directly.
No, if you're seeing a crime in progress, then you just call 911 and tell them you suspect either sex or labor trafficking and, let them come in and handle it, because it can be a very dangerous situation, not just for you, but for the victim themselves, because the victim, based on a lot of the trauma bonds that they already probably have with their trafficker, they're not going to recognize themselves as a victim in that moment while they're being exploited. And so it could backfire for them. It could backfire for you. They could take an extra beating from their trafficker because the trafficker will blame them for anybody trying to get involved. So it's better to have law enforcement. If you're not sure of what you're seeing, you can call the National Human Trafficking Hotline. They will contact law enforcement if it's a minor. If it's an adult, they're going to ask to speak to the adult. The hotline can help you assess if what you're seeing is actually human trafficking.
Okay. I know for me, I see these poor girls out on Sandy Boulevard, and it's obvious that they're minors, and I honestly feel helpless. I'm like, what do I do? I would bet a lot of people feel the same way. So it's good to know that I can just call 911 and say this is going on. You both have very different roles. In each of your roles, how are you addressing human trafficking? Ken, as part of ODOT, why is ODOT even involved, and how do you work with your role to address it?
I work with the Commerce Compliance Division at ODOT, and our primary role is outreach and education. We are not a law enforcement agency, but we do regulate the trucking industry. And the trucking industry are partners in our effort to outreach and education. We work with the Oregon Trucking Association, and we work through organizations like Truckers Against Trafficking to find materials that are designed for the transportation industry, because the truck drivers that are on the eyes and the ears of the roadway, they're in a position to see trafficking occur. So we want to get the tools into their hands that they can use to report trafficking when they see it.
How are truckers going to be seeing trafficking? Is it typically going to be more sexually related?
There are different drivers for all different roles of transportation within the United States. And drivers may be traveling across this country, staying the nights at hotels throughout the country, at truck stops. They may be going to shippers or receivers where they may see labor trafficking occur. They may see sex trafficking occur at truck stops. They are in places because of the nature of their job that takes them traveling throughout the United States to see it occur. And so because they're out there, we want to put those tools in their hands.
I didn't even think about all the different roles where they might encounter someone. Thank you. Kylla.
So TAT works with the trucking, bus, and energy sectors. Specifically, we started out with trucking, and what we really do on the private sector side is we create industry-specific, very tailored niche training for them. So we have documentary-style training videos that really go into how they're going to see it. We have another training that's for local drivers. I mean, you think about your Amazon, FedEx, even USPS, right? People that are coming into neighborhoods on a daily basis and dropping things off. That could also be rideshare. That could be flower delivery, food delivery, things of this nature. We have a specific training for them and how they might see it and the signs that they should look for. We also have a different training for movers and in-home delivery because there's a lot of familial trafficking. That's grandparents, parents, uncles and aunts, siblings that are trafficking their own family members. And they're oftentimes, especially when they're younger, they're doing it out of their homes. So there's these residential brothels, if you will. And so movers and in-home delivery might be seeing a whole other set of indicators. For the bus, you've got transit and motor coach, a lot of runaways that are a high priority risk audience for traffickers. Like they're looking at that group. They take transit buses, they take motor coach to get out of the city. So we're training bus drivers and terminal workers to know what to look for, to identify them. And we have posters up that speak directly to these people. Hey, do you know the person that you're going to meet? Hey, that job offer, do you know who's actually offering it to you? And like speaking to them and making them think through before and hopefully preventing some trafficking. And the same thing with school transportation. So many kids that are being trafficked and exploited, they go to school during the day. They're being trafficked in the evenings, on the weekends, and on holidays. So if we can train school transportation professionals on the realities of trafficking and how they might see it in one of the pupils on their buses, then they're going to be able to step in. So we really work to tailor industry-specific trainings. We also, on the public sector side, whether working with agencies like Oregon DOT or law enforcement officers, we have crafted trainings for them and crafted materials for them so that they can really both raise awareness with the industries that we work with, but also be trained themselves to notice it and to be able to identify it and then know how to employ a victim-centered approach when they're talking to a victim.
That's amazing. I love all the work that you're doing, but also thinking about outside of all those different industries. I would have never considered that. That's really, I'm learning a lot from this interview today, so thank you. Ken, I know that you will be working with TAT during Human Trafficking Prevention Month. How are you doing that? I know there's something about the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance holds a Human Trafficking Awareness Initiative. Can you tell me what you'll be doing?
So Oregon, along with just about every other state in the United States, is going to be participating in the Commercial Vehicle Safety Alliance Human Trafficking Awareness Initiative. And that is an effort by all the state agencies that regulate the trucking industry to get out and educate drivers roadside about human trafficking, what to look for. We're going to be providing refreshments at some of our locations. We are going to be handing out Truckers Against Trafficking wallet cards and windows decals to drivers. We're going to be inviting them in to watch some of TAT's videos on what to look for human trafficking. And our goal is to reach out to as many drivers as we can. And I know we're working with some of our highway folks to even have some VMS messaging available statewide, and our goal is to educate as many people as possible within that week.
How do the truck drivers and carriers usually respond to this initiative?
I've never had a bad interaction. Drivers, just like the rest of us, are out there making a living. It's hard work. Being a driver is not an easy job. And they are out there supporting their families. They have wives, they have kids, they have nieces, they have nephews, and they don't want trafficking to occur either. And so we've only ever had positive interactions with truck drivers in sharing this information. And it's one of those things that we can work with industry together on to prevent.
That's wonderful. Do you have any success stories about how this initiative has impacted someone's life?
So one of the hard parts about outreach and education is you don't always get to see the results of your work. That's why pairing with an organization like TAT has been key for our agency. Truckers Against Trafficking has a Harriet Tubman Award where every year they recognize drivers in the industry that have taken action to prevent human trafficking from occurring. And I would encourage you to visit their webpage, tatnonprofit.org, where they recognize a lot of the success stories and talk about drivers that have prevented human trafficking.
Yeah, I'll definitely want to check that out. For both of you, what is one of the biggest challenges in addressing human trafficking in Oregon?
I wouldn't say that there's any challenge specific to Oregon versus the rest of the United States. I think it is a continual education process for people to understand that prostitution is not a by choice professional opportunity. It's such a small percentage, 2%, that actually could do something else and choose to do it. 98% of people in prostitution are there through a trafficker or lack of other viable options. They are desperate people being completely exploited by the powers that be, right? People that are buying, traffickers, just these systems that are in place. And so I think that that's always an ongoing challenge, is really helping people understand what it is they're seeing. Also, understanding that victims don't always present as victims. They're going to present as sort of hard edge, sometimes criminal. And that's just the hard edge that they've put up on themselves. Like, that's their protection from all of the trauma that they have faced. So I would say that those are always ongoing challenges nationally.
I will add that Oregon has a organization of local human trafficking task forces throughout the state. Those task forces can always use additional help, additional funding. And if anybody wants information on how to become involved, if you just Google Oregon human trafficking, the first thing you're going to hit is the Oregon Department of Justice's webpage on human trafficking, where they can link you to those organizations and you can find out how you can assist to prevent this from happening.
That's fantastic, because I'm sure a lot of people are going to listen to this and ask themselves, how can I get involved? I know that I personally am, because you want to help, but sometimes you feel like, how? It's just such a huge problem.
And I think what Ken was saying is right. If you go to the local task forces, they'll be able to connect you with the service provider groups within your region, and they always need donations of various types, and they need mentorships. There's just a ton of ways to get involved in really practical ways. I mean, I've seen people that, I knit blankets. Okay, we need blankets. I bake cookies. Okay, we need cookies. I could do a toiletry drive at my church or in my neighborhood, and feminine products, all of those things. That's a constant need. There's always ways to get involved beyond just a straight cash donation. They have job skills training, right? Like, so can you go in and teach them how to write a resume or how to do interviews, how to command the room with their voice? There's a lot of great options, and I feel like everybody has a role to play. Really, truly, they do.
Yeah. Any final thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners today?
I think all I would say is, trafficking is an everywhere problem. So it really is an everybody's solution. And I always like to leave people with this. There are more good people than there are traffickers. And when we stand together, when we stand in the gap, we really can make a difference, and we can defeat this.
I will add that one of the things I've learned doing outreach and education here is that it can happen in any community in this state. Don't just think it's a big city thing. It can be local. And so everybody should take the time to learn about human trafficking, what it looks like, and how to report it.
Great advice. Well, I'm joined this morning again by Ken Oke with ODOT's Commerce and Compliance Division and Kylla Lanier with the TAT nonprofit organization. Thank you both so much for joining me and sharing the important work that you're doing to end human trafficking. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Inside ODOT podcast. If you'd like to learn more about these topics, you can find links on our show notes page. If you have any story suggestions or feedback, send us an email at the Inside ODOT mailbox. Until next time, I'm Liz McIntyre. Safe travels, everyone.